On December 24th, 1914, in the frozen, blood-stained mud of Western Europe, a miracle happened. Thousands of men who were ordered to kill each other laid down their rifles and began to sing. This is the story of the Christmas Truce, the night humanity defeated war. World War I was supposed to be over by Christmas. That was the promise made to millions of young boys sent to the front lines. Instead, by December 1914, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare. The trenches were flooded with freezing water, disease was rampant, and death was a daily routine. Enemy lines were so close, sometimes just 50 yards apart, that soldiers could hear each other breathing, coughing, and praying. As night fell on Christmas Eve, 1914, an unusual, almost eerie silence swept over the battlefield of Flanders. The constant, deafening thundering of artillery suddenly ground to a halt. For the first time in months, the air was free from the smell of burning gunpowder. Cold winter wind blew across no man's land, carrying only the faint sound of falling snow. British soldiers in their muddy trenches cautiously peeked over the sandbags, expecting a surprise attack. But instead of gunfire, they saw small, warm flickers of light emerging along the German lines. The German troops were placing hundreds of tiny Christmas trees, adorned with burning candles atop their parapets, transforming a desolate war zone into a sea of soft golden light. Then, floating through the freezing night air, a clear tenor voice broke the stillness. A German soldier began to sing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. Across the frozen field, the British listened in disbelief, deeply moved by the familiar melody.
Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht.
Moments later, British soldiers joined in, singing Silent Night in their own tongue. Two enemy armies, separated by war, were now united by a single song. At first, neither side trusted the silence. British soldiers crouched behind sandbags, suspecting a deadly German trap. But then, a friendly voice called out across no man's land in accented English. "Come over! We won't shoot if you don't!" Slowly, cautiously, unarmed men began stepping out of their muddy trenches into the open darkness. Stepping onto a field where, just hours earlier, a single move meant instant death. In the middle of the frozen battlefield, mortal enemies met face to face under the starlight. They didn't see cold-blooded killers. They saw farm boys, factory workers, and young husbands far from home, freezing in the dark. Hands were shaken. Language barriers dissolved with smiles. They shared family photographs, exchanged cigarettes, German beer, British plum pudding, and even uniform buttons as souvenirs. For a few legendary hours, the horrors of war were forgotten. Replaced by warm laughter, shared memories, and a famous improvised game of football played with a makeshift leather ball on the frozen mud. News of the unofficial truce quickly reached the high command on both sides. Generals and politicians were furious. To them, seeing enemy soldiers share food and friendship threatened the very continuation of the war. Strict, ruthless orders were immediately issued. Any further fraternization was high treason, punishable by court-martial and immediate execution by firing squad. As the cold sun rose on December 26th, the surreal peace began to fade. With heavy hearts and silent tears, soldiers embraced their new friends one last time. Exchanged final nods and slowly retreated back into their freezing trenches. The warmth, music and laughter vanished, instantly replaced by the grim, icy reality of war. Artillery commanders were ordered to resume heavy shelling. Officers blew their harsh brass whistles. Soldiers reluctantly raised their rifles across no man's land once again, but this time looking through the iron sights at men whose faces they had held in friendship, whose chocolate they had shared, and whose names they would never forget. The Christmas Truce of 1914 was never repeated on such a scale again. As the war dragged on for 4 brutal years, chemical weapons, heavy tanks, and relentless propaganda turned hearts into stone. Over 20 million lives were lost before the guns finally fell silent in 1918. Yet in one of the darkest chapters of human history, a few thousand ordinary men proved something profound. They proved that hatred is not human nature, it is manufactured. For one magical night in the frozen mud of Western Europe, humanity proved stronger than the entire machinery of war. As we look back through the pages of history, the Christmas Truce stands as a timeless beacon of hope. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments, our shared humanity will always be our greatest strength. Thank you for watching Lens of Humanity. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of who we truly are. Until next time, remember to look at the world with compassion.